Welcome to the 2KK Uncensored Podcast.
I'm Rachel.
And I'm Joe. And we are
the Two Crazy Ketos.
So today we have an interesting topic.
I was so excited, Joe. I was just so excited. We're going to be talking today about the new food pyramid. And I got to tell you, when I saw this puppy hit the presses, I shouted. You heard me yelling from the other room.
Yeah.
I was so excited to see our beloved meat and vegetables up in the top. I saw butter. I saw cream. I thought, finally, we got the grains on the bottom. We about to enter an entire new era of better health in our nation. And then we read the guidelines.
Yep, that's an issue. So when you look at the picture is awesome.
Is it a mullet? Is this a mullet like party? What is it? Business in the front and party in the back?
Yes.
It's mismatched, right?
Yes. It's party in the front and business in the back, and the business doesn't look good. It just doesn't look good. So what we're going to talk about is not just the food pyramid, but what people are missing about the food pyramid. You know, if you turn on social media or the news, you're seeing the keto carnivore community and the health people quietly going, yes, this is awesome, because they're only seeing the picture. And then you're seeing this other side in the news going, this is horrible. But I don't think they're reading it either, because if they would actually read the recommendations, they'd be like, this is kind of similar. The picture just looks different.
There's so many layers of nonsense whenever we get new information right now that like you have to pull off all of these covers before you get to the actual thing we're talking about, right? Because you, first of all, have to see this is getting rolled out by an administration. Whatever the administration is, somebody hates them just for being them, right? So it doesn't matter like who's in charge. One half of the population doesn't want to receive any information from the administration because it is the administration that they didn't vote for, right? Good or bad, right? So automatically you have to be like, okay, I have to put this through the lens of a lot of people will just push back because it's not their person promoting it. And it would be the same if somebody else was in office, right? And new information came out. So first of all, you have to take that cover off and just be like, okay, is this really good? And just half of the people are always going to be mad no matter what. Then you get to the picture, and the picture looks really good. And that's the package, that's the wrapper. And I gotta say, as somebody who's been keto for 9 years, I wanna kick myself in the pants because I didn't turn the package over to read the nutritional information, right? I just took it based on the front of the package. And we always tell everybody, don't do that thing. You got to read what's really inside of it.
Now, I do want to say this is not a political discussion.
No.
I mean, what we're talking about with, the party in charge, it's absolutely true. And we don't want to dive into politics. This isn't about politics. This is about our health. And even though there's a lot of aspects of the guidelines, the written portion of the guidelines that I don't agree with and that are troublesome, which is what we're going to talk about, you still have a picture. And just like when you buy food in the grocery store, a lot of people buy food based on the presentation, what's on the front of the box, and they never turn over the box. Just like you were talking about, right? They see on the front, low fat, heart healthy, low sugar, keto, and they never turn over and look at the nutrition label. My biggest hope right now is that's what's going to happen with this picture.
That nobody reads the accompanying paperwork, right? They just look at the picture. They take it at face value. If you just looked at the picture, you'd probably be okay.
So let's get into the good, the bad, and the ugly for the new food pyramid. Unless you've been living under a rock, you've probably seen this new food pyramid. It's completely upside down from what we had. Protein is now on top, grains are now on the bottom, and a lot of people are saying they finally fixed it.
And to be fair, there are some real improvements.
Now, I want to be clear. We're not trying to be contrarian for clicks here.
No, if this gives people permission to move away from processed junk and toward real food, we think that's a win.
But here is the thing. This is not the metabolic revolution that people think it is.
It's better.
It is better, but it doesn't mean it's fixed.
So today we're going to walk through the good, the bad, and yes, the ugly, not the picture, but what the recommendations are actually telling people to eat.
Because when you look at the picture, it looks great. But when you actually read the guidelines, not so much. So let's start off with the good, because there is some progress here. And one of the biggest changes in the new recommendations is protein is now finally being treated as a priority instead of an afterthought. For decades, protein guidance was built around deficiency. The old recommendation said you should eat about 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight, which really wasn't an optimal target. It was simply a survival number.
But people didn't realize that. They thought that they were hitting their protein goals when those goals weren't designed for satiety or energy, and especially not for metabolic health. It was just for basic survival.
The new guidance is now pushing protein intake closer to 1.2 to 1.6 grams per kilogram for most adults. And that is really a meaningful improvement. It's now acknowledging that protein is going to play a bigger role in our appetite regulation, our muscle preservation, and our overall metabolic function.
And we see this all the time. When people actually eat enough protein, they feel more satisfied, they snack less, and food decisions feel calmer instead of chaotic.
Another important shift is that the recommendation is now to eat protein at every single meal. Historically, our meals have been built around carbohydrates, and protein was just something that you would add in if you remembered to do it.
Which is why everybody was hungry an hour after their meal. Because when protein isn't the foundation of a meal, blood sugar swings and cravings are almost guaranteed.
They're also finally acknowledging muscle loss as we age. And that protein is now key for preserving our muscle, which that's going to impact your metabolism, your blood sugar, and your long-term independence.
Especially for women. This matters more than we've ever been led to believe.
From a keto and carnivore perspective, this is one of the strongest points of alignment. Protein will stabilize your blood sugar, it will support your satiety, and it helps people feel better even before they change anything else in their diet.
But protein doesn't exist by itself. It usually comes with fat. And how the guidelines handle this is where things start to get complicated.
So there is a positive shift with fats. And that is that the guidelines are now talking about healthy fats instead of treating all fat as something that we should be avoiding. That alone is a big change from the low-fat era that we all grew up with.
Yes, for a long time, people were told that fat was a problem, full stop. And that created a lot of fear around foods that were actually very nourishing.
So the new recommendation now acknowledges that fat plays a role in your satiety, in your nutrient absorption, and in your overall health.
And that's going to give people permission to move away from fat-free, highly processed products that were never satisfying to begin with.
Again, from a keto and carnivore perspective, recognizing fat as a part of a healthy diet is a very important step.
Yes, because fat is what makes meals satisfying and sustainable, especially when carbs are reduced.
So some of the fats are, though, being encouraged. Some are still very limited, and some of the really problematic fats are quietly remaining acceptable.
And here's where confusion gets created for people who are genuinely trying to eat better.
There's progress here, no question about it.
But there's also a lot of contradictions.
And we're going to get into those more when we talk about the bad as well as when we get into the podcast.
Now, another real improvement that we're seeing in the new recommendations is that ultra-processed foods are finally being called out directly. That's something we've never seen emphasized like this before. For a long time, nutrition advice treated food as nothing more than calories and macros. If it fit the numbers, it was considered fine, regardless of how it was made. And that's where so many people got stuck. They were told they were doing it right while eating foods that were technically low fat or calorie controlled, but it still left them feeling hungry and inflamed and exhausted.
And the shift here is that processing level is finally being acknowledged as a health factor. The guidelines are now openly discouraging foods that are engineered to be hyperpalatable, shelf-stable, and easy to overeat. That is a meaningful step forward.
Yes, because people can feel the difference. They know how their body responds to real food versus something that came out of a box, even if they couldn't always explain why they felt the difference.
So the ultra-processed foods aren't just about sugar and calories. They're about the refined ingredients, the industrial fats, the additives, the textures that bypass the normal satiety signals.
Which is why people can eat way past fullness without even realizing it.
Now, this is also going to change the tone of the conversation. Instead of telling people to just eat less, it's now acknowledging that certain foods are designed to override our normal biology.
And that is huge for people who have spent years blaming themselves for something that was largely a food environment problem.
So from, again, a keto and carnivore perspective, this is one of the strongest points of agreement. Both approaches are naturally eliminating the ultra-processed food by focusing on whole, real ingredients.
And just like in the circumstance of the protein, if all you do is focus on this, simply removing ultra-processed food without changing anything else, it's going to improve your energy, it's going to improve your digestion, it's going to improve cravings.
Now, this is where we need to be careful, though, because calling out ultra-processed foods is a huge step. But what they still allow under the umbrella does matter.
Yeah, because the definition isn't always clear, and some highly processed ingredients quietly remain acceptable. We're not going to unpack that fully here, but that's absolutely something that we're going to dive into on the podcast.
So yes, acknowledging ultra-processed foods as a problem is real progress. And for a lot of people, that shift alone could change how they think about food.
But just like with protein and fat, the details matter.
Another area where the guidance is also improved is how they're going to finally talk about sugar. The language is now stronger and more direct than we've ever seen before. Instead of saying just limit sugar in your diet, the recommendation now is added sugar should be as low as possible.
That is a huge change because for years, people were told that sugar was fine in moderation without any real explanation of what that actually meant.
So they're also now very clear about sugar-sweetened beverages like sodas, sweet teas, and energy drinks. They're all now being explicitly discouraged.
And for kids, the message is even stronger. There's now a clear recommendation for 0 added sugar early in life. And when we're saying early in life, they're saying 4 years old and younger.
Yes, and that matters because sugar isn't just about calories. It drives up your blood sugar spikes, it increases your hunger, and it makes your appetite regulation much harder, especially for people who are already insulin resistant.
And that helps explain why so many people felt like they were failing when they were really following advice that worked against their biology.
So reducing sugar intake is one of the fastest ways to improve energy, cravings, and mood.
So again, if you just take this out of context, cut back on sugar, and that's the only thing that you do, for the first time, you could start having food interactions that felt not addictive.
That's not going far enough, though. There's no real conversation about insulin, fructose load, or individual tolerance.
But compared to where we were, Joe, this is meaningful progress.
Now, we've talked about some of the good. Let's get into some of the bad. And there is some bad, and there's also some ugly. The first bad I want to talk about is saturated fat, because this is where the math is really failing. Saturated fat is still capped at 10% of your total daily calories.
And for a lot of people, that's going to be around 22 grams of fat per day. That's a steak and an egg, and then you're there.
So this is a contradiction. They're telling you now to eat more animal protein, but the fat that naturally comes from animal protein is going to push you over the limit almost immediately.
Which means that if you're trying to follow the rules, you're forced into lean meats, low-fat dairy, and removing the very parts of the food that make it feel satisfying.
That's not how human beings have ever eaten historically. And it's not how most people thrive. If you strip away the fat, you're not just removing calories, you're removing satiety.
And that's when the hunger comes roaring back, even though you've technically been doing everything right.
So another bad thing is the animal foods are being encouraged, yes, but with fear. They're now saying that you should eat these animal fats and these animal foods, but they're treating it with a lot of suspicion. Saturated fat is still being lumped together regardless of its source.
There's no meaningful distinction between the saturated fat in a ribeye and the saturated fat in a donut.
Whole food animal fat is not the same thing as processed food fat, but the guidelines are not separating those ideas.
So people walk away thinking that they need to eat animal foods. Carefully though, cautiously, almost apologetically.
That's a big miss. especially for people who are insulin resistant and they're metabolically unhealthy.
Because for many of these people, carbs aren't just unnecessary, they're actively problematic.
Bad number 3, they're not recognizing fat as a fuel. Even with all of these changes, they're not acknowledging that fat can be a primary fuel source. There is zero conversation about fat adaptation, metabolic flexibility, or that ketosis can be a normal human state.
Yes, carbohydrates are still being treated as the default fuel, and fat is treated as something that you sprinkle in carefully, whatever the heck that means.
The other thing is that they have this one-size-fits-all rule. It's all tying back to a bigger issue that these recommendations are really saying everybody is the same.
Right.
There is no distinction between somebody who is metabolically healthy and somebody who is trying to reverse insulin resistance.
The diet that maintains health is not the same diet that restores it.
So when people ask, why does this feel confusing? This is where we're landing.
Because there's a difference between something being imperfect and something being fundamentally contradictory.
Now let's get into the ugly, and this is something that is quietly surviving, and I'm not seeing a lot of people talk about it. Even while discouraging ultra-processed foods, the guidelines are still quietly allowing, and in some cases actually encouraging, seed oils. And this is where the entire framework is really breaking down.
Because seed oils are often described as healthy vegetable oils, which sounds harmless. They even sound beneficial.
But seed oils are some of the most highly processed ingredients in the modern food supply. We're talking about oils that are made from corn, soybeans, canola, sunflower, safflower, and those don't exist without industrial processing.
You are not making these things at home because they require high heat and chemical solvents, refining, bleaching, and deodorizing just to be edible.
So this is a contradiction. They're telling people to avoid ultra-processed foods, but they are keeping the foundational ingredient that makes all ultra-processed foods possible.
Yeah, because if seed oils disappeared tomorrow, most ultra-processed foods would disappear with them.
Let's get into another ugly. There's an issue of stability. Seed oils are high in polyunsaturated fats, which are extremely prone to oxidation, especially when you heat them, like when you're cooking.
Yeah, and that matters because these oils are used everywhere in restaurants and packaged foods, fryers, and even heart-healthy cooking sprays.
Oxidized fats create inflammatory compounds that stress your body at a cellular level. But instead of addressing oxidation and inflammation directly, the guidelines are continuing to focus entirely on cholesterol and saturated fat.
So people are taught to fear butter while cooking with oils that are far more chemically unstable.
So from a keto and carnivore perspective, this is a big disconnect. They're putting on the picture, eat animal fats like butter, tallow, and ghee, and those are naturally stable and minimally processed, and they've been used for centuries.
Yet those fats are still treated cautiously while seed oils quietly remain the default.
And this ties directly back to the saturated fat limit. When animal fat is restricted, people still need energy.
And that energy almost always ends up coming from seed oils, whether they realize it or not.
And this isn't a small oversight. You can't meaningfully reduce ultra-processed food without confronting the seed oil issue.
And you can't talk about healthy fats without explaining which fats are actually stable, traditional, and supportive of metabolic health.
So this is where our podcast is going to go much deeper, because once you really understand how the seed oils enter the food supply
and why they're still protected, the entire nutrition narrative starts to make a lot more sense.
So when we talk about contradictions in the guidelines, seed oils aren't the only one.
No, there's another category that quietly survives almost unchanged, and that's grains, though they're showing them on the bottom of the pyramid picture, Joe.
So even with all of the changes, you're supposed to eat more protein, fewer ultra-processed foods, grains are still being treated as a necessary part of a healthy diet. They've reduced its emphasis, yes, but they're not really questioning them.
They're still framed as important for fiber and energy and overall health, even though many people don't tolerate them very well.
And this is a big problem because grains aren't neutral foods for everyone, especially here in the United States. They are a modern staple, not an ancestral requirement.
And for people dealing with insulin resistance and autoimmune issues and gut problems or chronic inflammation, grains often make things worse, not better.
A lot of the grain argument is still coming back to fiber. They have this assumption that no grains equals a poor gut health.
But that is not universally true. Plenty of people thrive with very little fiber or even none, especially when eating animal-based diets.
So these guidelines are not acknowledging that fiber tolerance is individual. They're treating it like a vitamin that you're going to become deficient in rather than something that can be therapeutic for some people, but very irritating for other people.
And when people are told that they must eat grains for fiber, it keeps them locked into foods that may be driving their symptoms.
Now, there's another issue with grains, and that's they're still a safe default. Even though they're now prioritizing protein and ultra-processed foods are now being discouraged, grains are still being treated as a safe fallback food. Low-fat, familiar, cheap, and fortified.
Which is exactly why people keep getting pushed back toward bread and pasta and cereal when they're told to limit fat or saturated fat.
And this ties directly back to the saturated fat problem again. When fat is now restricted, and protein is capped by fear,
grains become the default energy source, even for people who don't do well on them.
So again, we're not trying to demonize grains. This is about honesty.
Yeah, if grains were truly optional, not essential, that should be clearly stated.
And you can't really say one size doesn't fit all and then keep recommending a food group that many people actively struggle with.
Because once you question why grains became the default and who benefits from that framing, the entire nutrition conversation shifts.
So where does this leave us? This is progress, absolutely. But they haven't fixed it.
No, and if you've ever felt confused trying to eat quote unquote healthy, this is why.
So now that the video portion is over, I think we can really dive deeper into a conversation about this new food pyramid. And the bottom line is just you can't really unpack these new recommendations in a 20 to 25 minute video.
No, and nobody wants to see us talk about this for an hour.
I don't want to sit in the same position for an hour.
So let's put our feet up on the table and let's begin in the good. All right, let's dial it back to the good. We started with some pros. We don't think that this whole thing sucks and, we got to throw the baby out with the bathwater. What we're just trying to say with this podcast is this ain't the end. This needs to be the beginning of the discussion.
Yeah. As we said in the beginning of the podcast, the issue isn't the picture. The picture is great. The issue is the recommendations that go along with the picture are confusing. And people aren't confused because they're dumb.
No.
They're confused because the rules are contradicting the picture.
Right.
And so we really want to talk about this, and I think it's good that we start off with the good. Let's start off with the good number one in the whole thing, and that is the protein.
Protein is so important, and we have been underserving our aged population. We have been underserving children. We have been underserving women. We have really been underserving metabolically unhealthy people with such a low recommendation for protein, and really the confusion that those used to be like protein standards, when in reality, we were talking about baseline worst case scenario standards.
So people are always asking us, how much protein should I eat? And I always tell people,
more.
Bare minimum. I don't care if you're 5 foot, if you're 3 foot, if you're 5'6", your bare minimum should be 80 to 100 grams. And that honestly is not enough. That is that survival aspect. That is like, let's just try to preserve what we have. But it's not going to help you build. It's not going to help you preserve like long term, especially because as we get older, we need more protein to preserve what we have. And then we have the issue of, the fact that it's harder to eat more as you get older, but you need more. So the fact that they're going from 0.8 grams per kilogram to 1.2 to 1.6 is a real positive thing, and something that I dare not talk about in a video because this is like another thing that is like a trigger for people, is we have to mention the fact that so many people are on GLP-1s right now.
Yes.
And on a GLP-1, you can lose a lot of muscle because you're not eating. in general, you lose your appetite on a lot of these GLP-1s. That's one of the reasons that you're losing weight. And so now you're consuming a GLP-1, whether it be a semi-glatitude, a trizipatide, or anything else, you're not eating as much, you're losing muscle, and people are automatically not eating protein. So now we have to even double down more on that protein. Like if you're on a GLP-1, I'm going to tell you, as you should through your medical professional be told, protein. You need to be looking at your food going like 90% of my plate better be protein because I've got to preserve every bit of muscle that I have.
Right. Because, if you're getting advice like, well, just eat what you can keep down, throw out that coach, throw out that doctor, because that is not the goal. You have got to be strategic. If you're somebody who has a very reduced appetite, whether it's because you're on a GLP-1 or because you're older and protein just isn't like as attractive to you, you still need it. You can't opt out of this. And so I would say you need to prioritize your protein. And I am thankful that finally you have, a federal government that's saying, yeah, you need your protein.
And the fact that your protein should be animal.
Yes.
I mean, I really do like the fact that they're saying that, like, hey, animal meat, okay for you. And there's a problem in that we're talking about some of this stuff as well, because when it comes to the protein, I kind of don't like the fact that you've got the vegetarian stuff all up there at the same level. And so they're kind of giving you this idea that like they're equal, and there's no real conversation though with the animal meats about the fact that they can sustain you, that you can get all of your vitamins and nutrients from eating that animal meat. The other thing about the protein though is it's really good that people are going to be told to eat more protein because it's going to satiate you, which is going to help you to not overeat the junk food.
Well, yeah, because it's going to help with your blood glucose. It's going to help, like you're saying, with satiety. It's going to help with cravings, because if you're fueling up with carbohydrates, you can look forward to be hungry again, like in less than an hour, right? We've all battled for that. But as much as I would like to wait to talk about the bad or the ugly later on, you've brought up an important point. A lot of people look to fortified grains or grains that are, combined with something else to do a job, like let's say protein infused pasta. And they're going to see that that's like, oh, okay, it's important for us to increase our protein intake. Yes, you've got the grains on the bottom, but when you're just saying, hey, protein is super important, but you're not making the distinction that protein coming from grains is not the same. Fortified grains is not the same as eating a ribeye. Like, I think that can make people confused.
Yeah, because not only are you dealing with the grains, you're also dealing with like vegetable proteins, like pea proteins. They're not the same. You need to eat a lot more of it. And you're going to look at somebody who's like, well, I'm eating 150 grams of protein, but it's all from pea protein. Well, your body doesn't utilize it the same as an animal protein. So overall, I think it's really good that they are emphasizing more protein, but as we said in the video, there's a couple of issues with them. And again, one thing we didn't mention was the fact that I think that they really need to dive a little bit more into the whole idea that you can be sustained on simply eating animal protein and that you don't need to eat other forms of protein as well. Now, we can't really talk about the protein without talking about the fat issue, because here's the thing. Animal protein naturally comes with fat in it.
Yeah. So, I mean, it sounds great that you're like, eat more animal protein. But if you're going to cap me at 10% fat, what is the animal protein going to look like? Chicken breast without the skin? Because it's certainly not going to be a bunch of eggs and steak or 80-20 ground beef.
Well, they're still keeping that 2,000 calorie recommendation.
Dude, if I could get people to eat 2,000 calories, it would be a freaking miracle. Most people are going to be like, well, I'm trying to eat 1,500 calories, maybe 1,400 calories. Now go to 10% of that, Joe.
Well, even at 2,000 calories, you're talking about, 10%. So you're only looking at 22 grams of saturated fat.
At best.
And so if you eat like just a ribeye and maybe 1 or 2 eggs throughout the day, you've already exceeded the amount of saturated fat you're supposed to eat. And they're not really diving into it. The math, it just doesn't work. I don't understand. It's like they put up this picture. This is why we're saying earlier, like, I'm hoping that you look at the picture but don't read the recommendations. Because if you read the recommendation, you'd be like, I can't eat the amount of meat that you're telling me to eat.
Is the illustrator not in the same room or not going to the meeting with the guy that's writing the guidelines? Because I feel like they're not communicating with one another. It's like, this is the goal, but we're going to make it impossible. Like, we need you to run from point A to point B, but we're going to tie your legs. And that's going to make the running a lot harder to do.
Yeah. And like we said in the video, there's no distinction between a ribeye and a donut. So if you eat a donut, which they're not saying don't eat it, they're not saying don't go to a bakery and buy a donut, don't make a donut at home. They're saying eliminate ultra processed foods, which for most people, they're going to interpret that as a packaged food, not something in a restaurant. Well, that donut's going to have saturated fat. It's going to be made with butter. It's going to be made with eggs.
So I can eat cake. I can eat an all cake diet as long as the cake is made in someone's kitchen, like an artisanal cake would be better health.
Well, it gets worse than that because let's be honest, even though we don't eat this stuff anymore, if you were given your option and you were told, listen, this is all you get 20 grams of saturated fat in your day. So you can have a dozen eggs or you can eat a giant piece of cake and you can have butter in your coffee. Which are you choosing?
Cake and butter.
Cake and butter, right? So you're causing people to make, honestly, what I think is an unhealthy choice because they're basically having these fear-based limits. They're not talking about the fact that your brain needs saturated fat.
Well, what I was excited for when I first saw the picture was the thought if someone is taking that picture in with like their grocery list, they're, the worst hot dog that they grab off the shelf or like the cheapest cut of meat that they get, just basic vegetables that they grow in their garden is going to be better than anything that they're going to grab if at the top of the pyramid is grains instead, because you got to look at budgets. People aren't thinking, oh, I'm going to do vegetarian or vegan, but of course I need to supplement that a lot. And so I'm going to do the very expensive and research-based dive into finding out what all I need to supplement in order to make a vegetarian or vegan life possible, right? Most people, when you're like, well, grains are where you're supposed to start, when I look in my wallet and then I look on the store shelves, I could just grab a box of cereal, a box of donuts. I can do a loaf of bread. And I'm going to say, okay, that's great. The bulk of my diet is grain-based.
So that's diving into another issue that we're having right now. I was talking to my mother this morning. How about the fact that the cost of animal meat is going through the roof right now? And so, again, people are being told, eat more protein. Eat more protein. Yes, the picture has animal up there and they're saying eat more protein, but limit saturated fat. Well, if you're looking at the cost of meat and then you combine that with the fact that you're supposed to still be limiting saturated fat, what are you going to do? You're going to turn to cheaper forms of protein that aren't as healthy for you, like pea proteins or powdered proteins.
Right.
You're going to see a lot of people buying protein drinks and shakes and then going, well, I'm eating my protein and I can control the saturated fat because I can control what types of fats are in there. Now, there is something that we did not talk about in the video at all. And I think this is something that we really should at least mention here in the podcast. And that is the fruit issue. We didn't mention it at all. And that's intentional, because it deserves its own conversation, and we just didn't have enough time inside of the video to do it, because fruit did not disappear in the new recommendations. All they've done is like change the tone around it, but it's still there. And they're just reframing in how you should consume it. And there's some positive things and some negative things.
So what is a positive thing you say?
So they're now at least emphasizing that if you're going to consume fruit, you should be consuming fruit, not fruit juice.
Oh, I totally agree with that because, yeah, we would go to Jamba Juice in the olden days because that was supposed to be #health. And all we're getting is the fruit juice. We're not getting the pulp. How many apples could you drink if the only thing that you're doing is drinking apple juice versus eating an apple?
And one of the things I'm hoping with, and probably a lot of people are not going to like hearing this, but these new guidelines directly impact kids in school.
Yeah.
So what I'm hoping is you start eliminating stuff like apple juice and all of that highly concentrated, ultra processed, sugar-filled stuff in school, like giving kids water, giving kids milk. Do you remember growing up, you got a milk carton delivered to your like classroom door every day? That's kind of gone out the window, and we're giving kids sugar juice.
Well, and I think it would be a good thing, a great thing. I know everybody's not going to agree with it, but I think it's great to give them real food. So if you're going to eliminate apple juice and you're going to give kids an apple as something that's offered to them at school lunch, I'm completely down with that. Like you said, give them water and milk and then give them an apple as a choice or grapes or something like that. I am completely fine to say, hey, let's start downplaying overly processed packaged dessert options and start thinking about making your dessert time a fruit. I'm fine with that because at the very least, it's a real food. Should it be the cornerstone of your day? Should it be the largest part of your plate? No. But if you're going to have dessert, making it an actual food, I think would be better.
I think it's a really good thing, but I also think we should put a caveat on there, and that is if you are metabolically healthy.
Oh, yeah, of course.
If you are not metabolically healthy, fruit is not a good substitution for dessert. It's not a good substitute. First of all, you shouldn't be having any of it. Like if you are struggling with like metabolic issues,
dessert should not be on your radar right now.
Exactly. You know, it can replace desserts when you're metabolically healthy. It can replace things like soda and pastries and packaged snacks, and it could be a step in the right direction. But if you're not metabolically healthy, then your body can't really deal with it yet. And again, this is something that's good when it comes to getting rid of the whole idea of juices and smoothies, because at least when you are consuming the fruit, you're consuming the fiber, which helps to like reduce the absorption of all the sugar that's in the fruit.
Yeah.
So the other thing that they're not talking about, though, is that they are still treating it as universally beneficial and low risk.
So fruit advice assumes a healthy metabolism.
Yes, that's really important to look at. They're not differentiating between people who have like insulin resistance problems, fatty liver issues, and metabolic syndrome.
And fruit's going to increase cravings for other things that you don't need to prioritize, right? Fruit, when you're consuming fruit, your hunger is going to return quickly. Your blood sugar is going to feel unstable. So definitely for people who are insulin resistant, for women in their midlife, for people who have been long-term dieters, if fruit made things worse for you, that's data, not failure. There's nothing wrong with you. You probably just need to stop esteeming fruit in your life.
So they have lowered the amount of servings that is recommended for fruit, but they haven't completely eliminated it. And I'm not saying they necessarily need to, but I think that the recommendation should at least deal with a couple of issues, and that is the fructose issue. They're not really addressing fructose honestly, and that fruit sugar is largely fructose, and that fructose is processed in your liver. It does trigger insulin the same way that glucose does, and it can lead to fatty liver disease because of the way it's processed. So that doesn't make it a free food, but we're not really talking about this stuff.
Well, and I know this is a much deeper dive, but we're certainly not talking about fruit that's been created in a lab, right? I mean, if we could just dial it back and say, hey, you need to have fruit that actually existed 50 years ago to even call it fruit. We're grandfathering in those fruits, but like cotton candy grapes was not a thing when I was growing up, right? And now it's flowing as if, oh yeah, it's always been. No, it hasn't. We didn't have that as a fruit.
And it's not even just grown in a lab. It's the way that we have altered the plants, that we've crossbred things. And I think that there can be times where crossbreeding could be good, but a lot of times where it's just really affecting the quality of the food. And like you're talking about cotton candy grapes, like that doesn't exist. Like in nature, we had to make them, and they've got like so much more sugar than grapes. Maria Emmerich has this whole thing where she shows pictures of wild strawberries compared to what we buy in a store. I look at bananas. We live in Florida. You have banana trees. A lot of the bananas that we grow in our yards, they're almost unedible. They're very seedy. They're like not super sweet. Like I think they're great for making breads and things like that, but it's closer to a plantain than it is to a banana that we buy in a store. But here's one, I didn't even tell you about this. So yesterday I went and picked up eggs from a gentleman for us to put in our incubator for some rare breeds. And we spent some time talking about his farm. And I noticed that he had some mango trees that were still in pots. And I thought maybe he was like selling mango trees. But no, he's actually like wanting to start plant more fruit trees around his farm. And he started telling me, he was like, if you want to get into fruit trees, because we want to get some like avocado trees and stuff. And we've talked about like even, putting up an orange tree or a grapefruit tree or a lemon tree, because if you eat it only when it's in season, which is like only about a month out of the year, it's not that big of a deal if you're metabolically healthy. So he started telling me about this one tree that he's like, you've got to get one of these trees. It is the most delicious fruit, and it is a pear. But he was like, they have basically somehow continued to crossbreed these different fruits. They crossbred like a pear with a mango. And he's like, it's like eating a pear that has been soaked in maple syrup.
There's nothing wrong with that, right? That could never backfire on us.
Like, how much sugar is going to be in that? He's like, it is the sweetest thing you've ever eaten. Well, how much sugar is in that?
Well,
and that's the problem.
That is the problem.
So, like, again, it's not that fruit is evil, but I don't think that they're really talking about the fact that, again, it's not a one-size-fits-all thing.
Certainly not.
So where it makes sense is if you've really, like fixed metabolic issues, but if you've got like insulin resistance and you've got weight loss stalls, you really need to like stay away from fruit, I think personally, entirely. And even when you are consuming it, it should be a locally grown in-season thing only.
I agree. Now, since we're talking about fructose, that naturally leads to discussions about sugar. Let's talk about why the guidelines still don't go far enough. Because, I mean, they go further than we've seen before.
So I think it's great that they're not saying like in moderation is okay. That the new guidelines are saying that it is something that you should consume as little as possible.
And definitely the recommendation to avoid like the sugary drinks does not have Coca-Cola's approval.
But they're not really diving into some of the sugar issues. They're not diving into the hunger issues, the dopamine response, the loss of appetite regulation that all comes with sugar. They're still framing it as a moderation thing and a willpower thing.
Which we do not have, because you really can't out-discipline a hormone.
The bottom line is sugar hits like your comfort and your stress relief and your emotional regulations. And none of that is really discussed. People, they're not weak. They're simply self-medicating because the sugar makes you feel good. It gives you a dopamine hit whenever you consume it.
And how can you argue with that? I want to push that button over and over again.
And the other thing is you have the fructose versus glucose issue. Glucose is used by your body immediately.
Right.
Whereas fructose is processed in the liver. It can only be processed in the liver. So that makes it more easily stored as fat.
And they don't really distinguish that clearly between the two.
The problem is they're telling us that we should moderate our sugar, eat as little as possible, but they're not really talking about the fact that like natural sugars are still not okay. You're going to fall into these people thinking like, well, it's okay to consume coconut sugar because it's not the same as refined white sugar. But the bottom line is sugar is sugar is sugar is sugar.
Well, and why is insulin still not being discussed, honestly? I mean, you're giving sugar advice with this one size fits all moo-moo, but you're not giving it an insulin context. What's the problem with doing that?
That's where I'm really having a lot of issue with, because like you said, they're presenting this thing as a one size fits all. These are the recommendations. It's like we talk about when it comes to macro calculators, and people will ask us, how much should I eat? And I'm like, that is such a loaded question. Like when we get a new coaching client, they're like, well, I'm eating this much. I'm like, okay, but we have to talk about a lot of other things. It's not just how much are you eating. Where were you at before? How long have you been chronically under eating? What is your movement like? What is your stress level like? What is your sleep level like? I look at you were eating 800 calories a day, 600 calories a day, and you were gaining weight. And then you get yourself up and you're eating over 2,000 calories and you're losing weight. Like there's a disconnect that isn't being addressed. And they're just saying like, these are the guidelines and this is what everybody should stick to. But they're not taking into account the fact that much of our country is insulin resistant. So with insulin resistance, you're going to have to limit the sugar even more than somebody who's not metabolically flexible. You're going to have to limit the grains even more, because all of that becomes sugar, but nobody is talking about these issues.
No, because if insulin resistance is the problem, sugar moderation is not the solution.
So when people are saying that, like, this is what the recommendation is, nobody is discussing, but in what context does it apply to you?
Is that always going to be a challenge, though, when you are trying to write a policy for a nation? You're trying to talk to a really broad audience. You're giving everybody the picture of the upside down pyramid. And that's being handed to somebody who is a sugar addict. That's being handed to somebody that's 70 years old and somebody that's 5 years old. I mean, isn't that naturally going to be something that happens?
I think it'll be an issue that you always have. But I think that you can present it in a better way where you're giving the picture and you're talking about like, these are the best foods to eat, and clearly outline the foods that you should limit or avoid and why, and go further into, if you are this should be limited more.
Do you think that some of the ambiguity is rooted in the fact that if we really do change things so much in the way that this nation eats and say, hey, it's going to be about whole foods, lead with meat and vegetables. Is there a fear that this is going to absolutely crush our economy?
I don't know about economy. I mean, if you really want me to get into conspiracy theory, I think that there is a fear by the people that helped design this of losing political power. I think that again, I can't say this for sure, but it's what it appears to me, right? And it appears to me that there was some lobbyist issues here.
Because it feels like there was a tiger that was released out of the cage. Like, finally, we're going to hear the truth. But it's like this tiger has no teeth.
Yeah. And I think there's no place more evident than in the seed oil thing. So when President Trump took office and he named RFK as head for the DHS,
Health and Human Resources. One
of the biggest things that you saw RFK talking about was seed oils, seed oils, seed oils, seed oils. I remember him, like, they had a video of him on the plane and everybody was eating McDonald's, right? And he was like, he made a comment, McDonald's, make your fries back with beef tallow so I can enjoy them.
I remember Steak and Shake almost immediately changed the fact that they were going to start cooking their fries in beef tallow. I mean, it's now an old painting on the side of their building because that was what they were going to do in response to that, because you felt like he meant business.
So you've got RFK sitting here going, stop with the seed oil, stop with the seed oil. Seed oils are bad. Seed oils are bad. But they quietly stayed here and nobody's noticing that. So let's talk about how they're quietly staying, because we touched on it in the video. And I think that this is kind of skating past. And the way that they are quietly staying is they're saying eat healthy vegetable oils. What vegetable oils are there that are healthy?
Do you squeeze like your corn and get a lot of juice out of that corn?
Because again, remember, they're saying you have to limit your saturated fat. Well, you have very few other places that you're going to get fats from. So if you're going to eliminate saturated fat, and they're telling you to eat full-fat dairy, so that becomes a problem. We didn't even touch on the dairy issue. If you eat a steak and a couple eggs, you're over your saturated fat. That means that you have to eat low-fat cheese and low-fat cream and all of that stuff. Forget yogurt, because that's all going to have saturated fat in it if you're eating full-fat versions of it. But they're not really getting into the whole thing. So they're saying, don't eat a lot of saturated fat, but you need fat. So where are you going to get the fat source? Oil? You're going to turn to some other issues. And they're calling them eat vegetable oils. And by that, what they're talking about is replacing your saturated fat with unsaturated fat. So they mean in practice, canola oil, soybean oil, corn oil, sunflower oil, safflower oil, and grapeseed oil. They're not naming the oils, but those are called vegetable oils. And they're telling you to choose healthy vegetable oils, but there is nothing healthy about those vegetable oils.
But you can definitely go to the store, go to the aisle with oils and shortenings, and you will find something that is called vegetable oil, and it's going to have a heart healthy sticker of approval on it. So if I am just shopping by the published data, that's what I'm going to be reaching for. Because if you're also not telling me coconut oil, and that may not be on people's radar, right? Organically, we never ate coconut oil before we started keto. We had never really thought about using that. That was something that you would get at like a fancy restaurant because they were making coconut shrimp and they would like cook it in coconut oil. But aside from that, we didn't really use coconut oil like we do now.
No, and it's still something that when it comes to coconut oil, there's still a lot of like bad press with it because you have the harvesting of the trees and the way it's labeled. And then again, they're saying eat healthy vegetable oils. And basically all they're doing is renaming seed oils vegetable oils. But when you think about the healthy oils that would not be a saturated fat, because that's the other thing about coconut oil is high in saturated fat. You're going to look at avocado oil. Avocado oil is not a vegetable oil. It is a fruit oil.
Right.
Olive oil is a fruit oil. And one of the big problems with avocado oil is there's like a lot out on the market that's not really true avocado oil. So it's much harder to get those good, healthy versions of it. And then when it comes to olive oil, you have the problem of heating it. Mm-hmm. And so that's the other thing is that they're not really distinguishing like the types of oils and how you should be using them.
Well, and we're not talking about how seed oils are the foundational ingredient in a lot of ultra processed foods. So if you've got, hey, it's a vegetable oil that we're going to use, well, you're going to find vegetable oils in sauces that you're going to use to flavor your food. Because again, I'm having this grilled chicken breast now. What am I going to do to flavor it up if I have to be careful with how much fat that I add to it, right? So I'm going to be turning to sauces and seasonings, which are often laden with these inflammatory seed oils that are labeled vegetable oils.
Yeah, and that is where there's a contradiction in this whole recommendation. So they're clearly and explicitly telling you avoid ultra-processed foods, but as we mentioned in the video, they are not saying anything about the seed oil. The seed oils are the foundation of all the ultra-processed foods. You can't tell me don't eat ultra-processed foods, but then one of the oils that you were recommending is ultra-processed because all vegetable oils are ultra-processed foods.
So if you got rid of the ultra-processed seed oils, you would by default eliminate most of the ultra processed food because you're talking about cereals got it, a lot of these bars that people eat that are Frankenfood nutritional bars, a lot of just like the crap food that's out there has got all these seed oils in it. So as soon as you say no seed oils, you'd have to take all of that stuff off of the shelves. Companies would have to pivot, but it would take them a minute. And it would give us an opportunity to go back to eating real food in the absence of these overly processed foods where the cornerstone of them is the seed oils.
And this is where this reeks of money changing hands. Like, and again, I can't prove any of this, but it sure kind of is pointing in the direction of either A, lobbyists somehow being involved, or B, fear of pissing people off. I mean, I feel like, like they've already upset people just with the picture, right? And you already have people screaming, this is against all best medical advice, which is all nonsense. I saw a post from someone going, so in other words, they know more than my doctor who went to 4 years of medical school. Go ask your doctor how many hours they actually spent on nutrition in medical school. You're going to be shocked to learn it was just a few hours out of 4 years. So you've already got that side where people are upset, and maybe they were like, well, we can't upset them too much, because here's the thing. If you were to come out and outright condemn in writing as a country, as our government, and condemn the seed oils, think about who that impacts. That impacts every processed food. That impacts all of big food. That impacts restaurants. That impacts farmers, because you've got farmers who are literally being paid to grow soybeans and corn in this country. So when you look at the financial ramifications of eliminating seed oils as a recommended type of food, or what they're calling now vegetable oils, something's fishy.
So in the past, we know that sugar got the pass and oil fat, like animal fat, was demonized. Right? For in the name of cholesterol. So in this pass, did sugar now find itself on the chopping block, but the antithesis of animal fats was spared from the chopping block?
It's almost like a reversal, and I guess this is where you can have a good thing. It's kind of like a reversal from the whole Ansel Keys thing, So if you go back there, like he was trying to prove that like fat bad, sugar good, and now we're kind of going back, going sugar bad, fat good.
But what fat?
But we're not getting enough into what fat, because again, there's no distinction between your cooking fats and your finishing fats. We're not talking about a differentiation of using olive oil only as a cold thing and then putting canola oil into deep fryers. We're not really getting into that. And then again, we're saying saturated fat's still bad. Saturated fat's still bad. So there's just too many issues with it. And again, I think it's a step in the right direction. I just wish they would have taken it further when it comes to like the actual fats, like specifically naming, consume avocado oil, consume coconut oil, consume olive oil as a finishing, but don't overheat it, because then you have oxidation issues, and looking at things in that way. Finding the natural fats that are in the foods that we consume that are vegetables, like in avocados and things like that.
I think it's going to require a big humility check, though, to not have the attitude of, I said what I said and I'm not changing anything, but instead to have the attitude of, hey guys, this is just the beginning. Now let's start the conversation. We know that things are upside down, and so as almost like a shock, we are going to turn up things upside down. And by upside down, we mean you need to go from having all of your food that you consume requiring you to take a wrapper off of it to it being real food again. And it needs to be a flip from everything being, I start my meal with the grains and I pepper in protein, to the flip of protein first, and then side dishes truly become side dishes again. And just say, hey, this is just the beginning. But that's going to take a major amount of humility, right? Because you may have spent all of your momentum just saying, like, slam these new rules on the table and say, like, this is it.
So it kind of leads to another problem. So we've talked about the protein. We have some good things with protein, some bad things with the protein. They're telling you eat protein, but then you have to limit your saturated fat. And then we're talking about the oils. Well, and then you have to look at, again, the cost of the protein. So what becomes the fallback? The fallback goes back to what used to be the foundation of our pyramid, is now like you eat the least amount, according to the picture anyway, and that is grains. But they didn't eliminate grains. They just reduced it by 2 servings. They're still saying 4 to 5 servings of grains per day. But when you take all of this together, the fact that we have to limit the saturated fat, and the fact that in order to limit the saturated fat, we have to consume more of like a leaner type of meat, and a meat that doesn't have a lot of fat, or you have to consume a lot of vegetables, you still need to consume energy. And so if you're not consuming the meat because you're concerned about the saturated fat, because you want to keep your calories under 10%, where are you going to get your energy from? Especially if you are going to use your head just a little bit and not eat vegetable oils, well, you're going to go to grains. Your energy is only coming from one of 2 places. It's coming from fat, or it's coming from grains. It's coming from carbohydrates.
Well, that's a huge thing that they're not discussing. They're not saying that like being fat fueled is an option.
Right.
That's a major gaping hole in this theory, because if you're saying, well, ultimately there's only one fuel for the human body, and that's carbohydrates. That's not true.
They're still saying carbohydrates are essential.
It's just not true. I mean, we're a living proof. You're just acting like we don't exist, because we are clearly fat fueled, not carbohydrate fueled.
They're saying that carbohydrates are still essential, and they're going at it from the side of you need fiber. You have to have fiber. You have to have fiber. But you don't. There are plenty of us that thrive without consuming a lot of fiber. And even more so, you have a lot of us that are thriving without carbohydrates. There is no such thing as an essential carbohydrate. And it's kind of like when you look at the way this pyramid goes, you're giving the vegan and the vegetarian side, you're giving them this whole area that they can go on, right? Because you've got all of the vegetables on top, and you've got the fruits, and you've got the grains, but you're really not talking about the keto or carnivore person, and the fact that you can thrive and get all of your vitamins and nutrients from meat. There's no mention of that. It's kind of like we've been completely ignored. Like they satisfy us by saying, eat this stuff, but not really eat this stuff. Like eat the stuff in the picture, but don't read the recommendations, because then you're going to realize we're telling you don't really eat this stuff. And so we have to really pay attention to this whole idea that we don't need grains. And for some people, grains are really going to harm them physically and nutritionally.
It would definitely impact my brain health journey to go back to eating grains. I could not authentically live a life fueled by purpose with grains. We know that now. We've tried that. We've gone back and forth. We've seen the difference. With grains, I cannot leave the house. Without grains, I can leave the house. That is a big distinction. And while there are people, like close friends of mine, who are experimenting with certain, fiber options because they have a very unique journey, I think that even they would say, hey, this isn't for everybody. I don't think that everybody needs grains. I mean, certainly I hope that everybody is not on the same fiber journey that I'm on, right? So I think that can be more fringe, that somebody is got to really be dialed into their fiber intake in order for them to be, at their highest level of health. I think if you are fat fueled, the majority of people can get along just fine without paying so much attention to the fiber like you do, maybe pre-keto, when you are consuming a lot of vegetables and you're going to the bathroom a lot. You're consuming a lot of food that your body doesn't break down the same way, right? You eat a bunch of corn, it comes out looking the same.
And there's another thing that is glaringly obvious that is missing from all of these recommendations, and that is that the grains in the United States are very different than other countries, and one of the main culprits is glycophosates. Like, there's no discussion of avoid GMOs. Avoid the glyphosate, the Roundup sprayed stuff. There's no discussion of that. And that is one of the problems with grains here in the United States. And yes, some people can tolerate them better than others. A lot of people have gluten insensitivities, even if it's not full-blown celiac. That all relates back to the grains. And there's a lot of people that might be able to heal some of their metabolic issues with a keto or carnivore lifestyle. We're not saying that you necessarily have to eat this way forever and that it's the only way. But the bottom line is that it is a healing type of lifestyle, but a diet that is going to maintain your health won't restore it. And this new food pyramid is assuming that this is what will maintain health. But a lot of people have to restore their health before they can maintain their health, and we're not discussing that at all.
So I wonder if, question for you, do you think that the better route, not that, anybody's calling us to see what we think about this, but was the better route to say, hey, we're going to ban seed oils and we're going to have a banned ingredient list within this country first, lead with that, and then come back in with what are we going to replace all of the vacant shelves with?
So, boy, it's a loaded question because I don't want to get into the political side of this. But I feel like we're trying to accomplish too many things at once. I feel like, here's what I feel like. I feel like right now, they're operating the health and human services the way we're building our house. Like it's like not one room is done. Our bedroom is done. But every other room has some aspect of it that we have not yet completed. We're bouncing from raising kuni pigs to cutting down trees to building a deck to like working on a back room to putting up the ceiling to like doing plumbing to doing wiring.
So nothing's finished.
Nothing is finished. And I would really like to concentrate on a couple of really good things that can really make meaningful impact. So though I'm happy to see the difference in the pyramid picture, I kind of go with you in that I would much rather see a banned ingredients list first. We started, and this is why I say this, we started a couple of months ago hearing a lot of conversation of we're going to ban artificial food coloring. We're going to ban the dyes and yellow number 5. And all of a sudden you had all these companies like, we make a promise that we're going to get this out by, it was like 2028 or 9 or whatever it was, which coincidentally was after President Trump leaves office. I thought that was kind of interesting, but I would much rather see listen, by next year, all of these ingredients are banned. No more glycophosphates, no more food colorings, no more artificial coloring, no more artificial flavoring, everything. I would rather, I think that would be a more meaningful impact than switching a picture on a pyramid.
Added confusion.
With added confusion to it. And it really comes down to this, is that before we can even look at what the recommended foods to eat are for a normal, healthy person, we have to fix the issues that have caused the problems in the first place.
Okay, so I want to leave on a positive note because this seems very grim. This seems like, man, this sucks, and now people are going to be more confused and we're doomed. We're not doomed. The good news is this is a good starting point within the keto and carnivore and low carb community. This is a win. We need to see it as a win. That we've begun a conversation where sugar is not necessary, that grains are probably not the penultimate of focus. Fiber should not be more of a focus than protein, right? We shouldn't be completely afraid of fat. 10% more fat in your life is 100% better than what it was last year, right? So there has been some improvement. So use this as the beginning talking point to point to what do I do if I'm eliminating sugar, I'm reducing grains, and I'm considering meat, and help your friends and neighbors shop from that new explanation.
I think the biggest benefit to this new food pyramid is the focus on whole foods, whether that be vegetables or fruits or meat. I mean, as ketos and carnivores, we'd like to see a pyramid where the whole top row was nothing but meat, and then non-starchy vegetables below that, And then below that, maybe some fruits. And then below the fruits, then having starchy vegetables with grains on the very bottom with 1 to 2 serving. To me, that would be the ideal pyramid, not the top row being half vegetables and half meat. But the conversation is at least started. And I think this is something that we definitely have to applaud. The conversation has started of whole foods, whole foods, whole foods, stop with the processed junk. That in itself is going to upset a lot of companies. And I think they're going to fight back. And I think those are the ones who you're seeing scream the loudest about all of this. But at least we're beginning to have a conversation of it's okay to eat meat. Even if number-wise it doesn't make sense, on the picture, they're saying it's okay to eat meat and you need to eat whole food. And I think that we definitely have to applaud that.
Well, and for everybody that's working toward policy change, just know we appreciate this discussion. We don't benefit from this financially. I'm not like having a product in the marketplace that's trying to keep it on the shelves because I want to continue making money. So I'm not lobbying and fighting against you. I would like there to be some continued conversations about this, but just know that we are behind you in having those conversations. We were ready for there to be a change, and we understand that changes are often bumpy at the start, but we do appreciate the conversation.
Well, that is going to be the end of today's podcast. I thought it was an interesting conversation.
We were all over the place.
We kind of went all over the place, but there was a lot to unpack here. I feel like you could probably break down in this whole thing into several podcasts.
Sure.
But nobody wants to hear 8 podcasts on why the new food pyramid is good or bad.
Right.
So we did the best we could to break it down. We're definitely not perfect, but hopefully we're able to like point some of the flaws and some of the good things about the new food pyramid. And again, the biggest hope is that people are going to look at the picture and not bother reading the recommendations. Because if you look at the picture,
you'll be doing good.
You're going to completely change your eating lifestyle. And I think that some of these things are really going to be beneficial for the next generation, for the youth. If these new recommendations can get things like the sugary treats and the juices and stuff like that out of the school system, then it's worth all of the confusion when it comes to us as adults and saturated fat and how much protein you should be eating and everything else.
Agreed.
So please do us a favor. If you haven't already, make sure you're following us on any of your favorite podcast platforms. And also, if you're not subscribed to us, head over to YouTube and subscribe to us over there, and make sure you hit the bell notification so that you're notified when we upload new videos. And also make sure you check out some of our channel sponsors with any of the links that are down below in the show notes. And until next time, I'm Joe.
And I'm Rachel.
And we are
the Two Crazy Ketos.